I'm Katie Klumper, CEO and founder of Black Glass. Happy to be here and excited to be joined by Jamie Moldafsky, the Chief Customer and People Officer today. Thank you so much for joining.
Great to be here, Katie.
So talk to me, Chief Customer and People Officer. That's a different title than we're used to. I love it. Talk to me about that dynamic and what is that role?
Yeah, so when I joined Nielsen about 2.5 years ago and came in as the CMO, so your traditional marketing and communications, and then somewhere along the road there added in customer success and really our focus on customers. And then really as part of our transformation journey, and we're like many companies continuing to transform into a more digital future, we came to understand fully how important it was for the culture to really equal what we are promising our customers, right? And it has to really start internally before it goes external. And so we brought those two together, and it just seemed like a natural transition to make sure that our people are as much of a focus for us as our customers are. And so it's been about 8 months or so, probably in the role, but it's been great to see them come together and just the synergistic nature of really caring for our employees the way we care for our customers and vice versa.
I love that. And you hear a lot about, the expanding remit of the CMO and how wonderful it is, but very few are given the true keys to the castle and being able to change the remit and be able to have that level of impact. How do you feel the economic uncertainty has impacted that? Has it accelerated? Has it pulled it back? Do you hope more other organizations will follow suit?
Yeah, I think so. I think it started actually with COVID. I think that CMOs had to become very creative about what their role was, right? People had to redefine the role very quickly. I think always anchored on the customer. People were always still anchored on the customer, but everything became upside down. And so it became a new world. And some people slid into more tech roles, and some slid into more customer support roles, and some slid into more HR roles. And I think as a result of that, the CMO remit did start to change anyway. And then I think with the recession, I do think it's twofold. I think one is just the realization that a lot of these levers need to get pulled closer together, and having silos doesn't help anybody. And I think there's an economic reality as well, which is if we can bring these pieces together, we'll be much more efficient and effective.
Yeah, it's fascinating as you hear transformation is always a buzzword going around, and for a long time it was all about the technology piece, and I feel like there's like this swing and anchor on the CMO and the use of brand, and brand kind of being that connective tissue both internally and externally.
Yeah, I think that's really right. I think the people piece of it and the importance of it, and I think to some extent just the acceleration of digital and the power of the consumer has shifted that as well. And so the company now anchors itself around the consumer more than it did, which has always been the strength of the CMO, which was to represent the market and the consumer. And so I do think that's what's come together nicely. And the other thing is competing for talent. I mean, we went through this big talent war, and the brand became even more important in becoming an acquisition tool for employees than it had been. And I think during the Great Resignation, I know we were asked, like most CMOs were, to really help out as much in recruiting as anything else.
Yeah. Well, so you're in the forefront of that, and kind of pivoting topics slightly, you're at you're at the forefront of data, right? Nielsen is leading the charge, and what is kind of this giant discussion around what is the future of first-party, third-party data? How do we start to reconcile that? How do we reconcile AI? And I know a lot of the CMOs that we talk to are talking about brand versus performance. And not a day goes by that a CMO isn't asking, can you give me a case study? Can you help me prove how brand is performance and performance is brand, and it's getting separated very frequently. How are you hearing that conversation in your business?
We hear that all the time, which is, I think the marketer wants it to be closer together. But I think the industry has pushed them further apart. And so I do think there is a realization for marketers they need better measurement. They need a way to tell the story of the full funnel, which doesn't even occur necessarily sequentially anymore. Right? And so the notion of performance building the brand and brand building performance, I think they're integrally interwoven. And so a lot of what we're trying to help the industry with is the measurement behind that. Right? To be able to actually prove out that it may be a 6, 12, 9 to 18-month lag, but that brand investment is driving an increase in performance effectiveness.
Absolutely. Well, and the important to measure it, like it's one thing to go to the board with case studies, but it's not enough.
It's not enough.
And really getting specific on like what are you measuring and like what sources of data are you looking at?
And I think that's one of the biggest changes for the CMO, I think you can't operate at a level of kind of, you still have to bring the creative side, right? And know that there's a big creative component to it that is a little bit more subjective. But I think the level of scrutiny on the analytics side is as high as it's ever been, because I think CFOs in particular, and you have to partner with them all the time, want the same rigor as they face in what they do every day.
Yes.
And if you can engage the CFO effectively in partnering on that measurement, I think it's much more successful.
So before you know, it'll be Chief Customer, People, and Data
Let's
Officer.
hope not. Not ready for that.
Talk to me about the relationship with CFO. You know, that is an important one. It doesn't come up often enough, and a lot of times it's at points of friction that you're trying to defend the budget. Talk to me a little bit about that relationship.
I think inviting the CFO in is a really important strategy, because I think, they bring in a lot of the financial rigor, a lot of the ability to tie what we were just talking about, brand and performance, into the actual financials of the business. They're the linchpin to that. I think what I found that most CFOs I've worked with, their teams want to be engaged in marketing. They want to understand it. They want to understand what it's driving. And then there's also a bit of they want to be associated with the brand. And so I've found over my career that inviting them in earlier and then really partnering and being really honest and transparent about what we know and what we don't know, and what are the tools at our disposal, how do we get better at measurement, is I think is the opportunity for the CMO. And then I think it's also look for help outside, bring in people who can help you tell the story.
Yeah, I've seen more CFOs participate in marketing conferences.
Yeah.
And even you see procurement very active in it, which is good to see in terms of how do you kind of bridge that knowledge gap, because it can be a lot of buzzwords, right? And it's like, how do we demystify it and help them be part of the solution as well, which is impactful.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's nice. I think they really want to be.
Yes.
And I think that erases the skepticism. I think you go into it sometimes thinking that the CFO is skeptical of what does marketing really do, especially on the brand side. But I've never seen a CFO who, when they're at the cocktail party and someone says, "Oh, I saw that, and I didn't realize you were doing this or that," that all of a sudden it's the power of that comes to life.
Yeah, you see kind of marketing being owned by all at that point. And how do you champion it? And you see that there's a lot of CMOs who are even moving into CEO and president roles as well as a part of that, because they've been able to galvanize the entire C-suite around.
And I think that was your point about the broadening of the role. The role has to be viewed as a C-suite partner, not as a marketing functional expert. And I think the mindset I've always had, and I think you have to have, is that you're the business owner just as much as the CEO and CFO are.
Yes.
And if they feel your stake is owned with them in terms of every aspect of the financial performance of the company, then I think they come to the table and are much more supportive.
Yes, no, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about societal change. So, we've talked about the title, we've talked about the data, but another big aspect of CMO's role is the importance that they take on in driving society and culture. And, more customers trust brands than the government. Which, is not surprising, but it is a huge weight on your shoulders as a leader and individual. So you're like, not only am I driving now marketing, and now I'm driving people in the organization, and I'm having to be at the forefront of data and all the transformation, but now you've also got the societal equation that sits on you. Talk to me a little bit about that in your role, and does it hit you, or?
Yeah, and we're really lucky. I mean, I always think that, the closer your purpose is, obviously, to the values of the company, and that you can share that, the better off you are with the societal change, because you have to know who you are, what you stand for, and you're not chasing the message of the day. So we're lucky because at Nielsen, we really are about measuring everybody, and so everybody matters. It has to be diverse, it has to be inclusive, and so our purpose aligns really strongly with societal, because we need to make sure that we are focused on diversity and inclusion at the core, that we measure every single person and what they consume in terms of content and advertising. So by doing that, it puts us right in the middle of that conversation, which is really helpful. And so we commission a lot of studies around diversity in media. And where is there diversity, where is there not diversity around the content, around the advertising side, and so we feel like we can really impact change. And it's nice because that is our brand. But I think a lot of B2B companies can still do that. I think that they still play an important role in the messaging around the importance of CSR, the importance of sustainability.
Absolutely,
all of those things matter. All companies have some form of commitment to that. It's just important to share it. And I know in our research we found that consumers don't hear that messaging strongly enough. I think it's about over 50% say they don't believe companies really are enacting change.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think there's a messaging opportunity that B2B companies can do just as effectively as B2C, but don't always think about doing it.
If not more, right? And just
more.
think about the financial power, as well as just the communications and the media that a lot of these B2B companies own. Is to shy away from that is unfortunate. You see it on the B2C side, to your point, all the time. We saw a lot during COVID, but even outside of that, during different societal moments, brands take a real active voice and take a stance. Did you find that that came up in some of those moments in your business more so, or?
Yeah, certainly very much around the diversity aspect, because I think people wanted to understand, right, how people are feeling in society, and because we measure audiences and what they're consuming, and you can imagine during the last 2 to 3 years, there's a lot of energy about how our audience is behaving, what are they watching, what are they not watching, you know, where are they watching it, and a lot of that is around, you know, the demographics and just the state of race in the United States as an example, right? But we see it in other markets as well. So there has been an increased demand, if you will, to understand and to have companies be able to articulate how they're addressing it.
Did you find any resistance on the board? I know a lot of, for B2C companies, we see that where they're trying to take a stance on a certain issue or government legislation. It can be very challenging because not only do they represent the consumer, which they know where the consumer stands, but they represent shareholders and a board and a much diverse set of groups. Do you find that on the B2B side and the board that impacts as well, or?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I've done a lot of B2C in my background, and I think you're right. I think with B2C, there's a much higher awareness of how consumers think and feel about these issues because they're reported on all the time. And I think businesses, the going-in proposition is that's not really relevant. Do we need to lean into that or not? And I think we try to be clear about when we are leaning in. It's either because it's very germane to our purpose, or it's about our employees. And I think on either of those, then there is a reason to do it. But I think it's also important to know what you're not going to do. And I think a lot of brands today are struggling, right, with figuring out where those lines are, because 50% of your population of your customers is usually on one side and the other.
And similar with employee base, we had CMOs who had different hubs of offices, and even if it was remote, you still had different locations within the world. And a lot of these issues hit them differently. And to your point, it's being able to look at all of that. So you really actually have three: the employee, the consumer, and the board to manage through a lot of those different. But you guys obviously have done a really great job, and I think going back to kind of data at the center. Like, how do you use that and kind of demystify some of the topics that you're going after?
And we are lucky to be a company that's centered on data, because I do think the CMO's biggest challenge is that, right? Is speaking then with numbers and with facts and with compelling data to make their case. And so it's nice to be in a business where people seek that anyway. You kind of have to come to the table with that. But it also is good. We have to eat our own food, right? So we have to be really good at measuring what we do, because that is what we actually provide to our clients as well.
Okay, I've got one last surprise question for you. So, title change.
Yes.
CMO versus Chief Customer and People Officer. Obviously, the CMO role continues to have a spotlight on it in so many different ways, and has taken on a lot of different titles. I believe that it is a vital role in society to drive not only brand and business, but society at large. And so I am a massive advocate. Obviously, I sit in the industry, but marketing will and continue to be at the forefront of change. Do you think that this title has given you more permission to play in other spaces because it's actually put customer and the people at the center, and this idea kind of marketing is on the sidelines to it?
And I would say it depends on the situation, right? So situationally, in some environments it is better to be the CMO, right? Because it is very clear usually what you bring to the table. But to your point, because it is less clear now, it also pigeonholes people sometimes and puts you in a box, because it's all in the eye of the beholder, right? The definition of CMO is in someone's mind. And I think that the title has become challenging because some people, I think you probably, when you talk to 5 CMOs, they all have very different functions underneath them, right?
Both in breadth and depth in terms of what they're able, and even decision-making rights of what they're able to make a call on or not.
And where it has been beneficial is, I think people say, oh, customer, people, I get it. Talk to Jamie. Like, it makes sense, right? And I also think it's grounded because it's focused on ultimately who you're trying to really serve and impact, whereas marketing is about an action that we take. And I think it's always nice to have customer, right, and people at the heart of what we do. And even though it is for CMOs, that's been the benefit of having that as a title.
I love that. Well, that is good food for fodder for everyone out there. Appreciate you coming and spending some time with us today. And to everyone who's watching, thank you.